Namaste and in Lakhets, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, share, because it benefits everybody, and you'll see why very soon. And by all means, stop by planetarycitizens.net and download the free book there called Planetary Citizens: Awakening the Heart of Humanity. I guarantee you it will soothe your soul and give you some insight as to what can be. So this week's guest is John Milor. He is an American author with 13 books to date, including Christian Ufology, The Strong Delusion, and Aliens in the Bible. So you can imagine what we're going to be talking about today. He's a public speaker, combat veteran, and retired senior enlisted cyber operations leader who's become known for pioneering what he calls Christian ufology, an attempt to interpret UFOs and extraterrestrial phenomena through biblical references. He worked in cyber operations for the Air National Guard for 25 years. So he's got both boots on the ground. And he left military service when the vaccines became mandated during COVID. So this is going to be really interesting. Stay tuned. I know you're going to enjoy this conversation. We'll be right back.
What if your true identity isn't defined by borders, but by your connection to all life? There's a shift happening. People everywhere are waking up, feeling the call to serve something greater. In Planetary Citizens, Awakening the Heart of Humanity, Zen Benefiel shares a bold vision and practical path for conscious living, global unity, and real-world change. This book is more than inspiration. It's a blueprint for becoming who you truly are and building the world we know is possible. Download your copy.
John, it's great to have you here. You know, when I first saw your image, I really felt like I already knew you. And maybe we do from wherever we travel in our off time, if you will. So glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me on your show.
You know, it's interesting how these experiences, inner experiences that we don't really know how to explain, and the outer reflections of them, we're bereft of bridging the two, which is what One World and a New World is about, is uncovering knowledge, the apocalypse, right? The apocalyptic chats, so that we can share what's going on inside, make it relevant, and then also share with the audience so that they don't feel so weird, crazy, insane like other people might think, and have the solace that, yeah, there are others like you out there. So thanks for being here and sharing your story too. Speaking
Yeah,
of, you grew up with a really cool experience as um, not quite Jesus-like, but you learned how to be a carpenter really young, right? Your dad was in
yeah.
building trades, and how did that, in those times, did that give you some moments of contemplation that you were able to have an experience of the interconnectedness beyond what the outer world was about at that time?
I suppose framing houses can have moments of kind of wax on, wax off,
Yeah,
except it's more like weightlifting.
sure.
So
Oh, absolutely.
you're balancing on the top of a wall, and lifting up a rafter like this and handing it to the person at the top and then having to nail it in place. And it's like, okay, that was very hard. I have 150 more of those to do.
Right.
And during times like that, my mind would wander onto different things. But that's just generally me. Um, I would always
Well, off
be
the
looking
roof.
beyond, yes,
Yeah,
off the
off the
roof, on the
roof, and,
roof.
and in your daily life, did you have anything in your childhood that gave you indication that there was much more to life than what you knew at the time?
Yes. So I would say my first experiences that I really remember clearly go back to being about 5 years old.
Hmm.
Um, so I had seen demons as a child. We had some unsavory people visiting our house one evening, and for some reason, one of them stayed the night. I do remember, I think that that was the reason why they were in the house that particular night. But I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw these greenish little things. They were about 2 feet long, 2 to 3 feet long. They were semi-transparent. They had black eyes and black mouth, and the room was swarming with them. And when they noticed I was awake, they swarmed up into my face and they projected intense fear and terror. And
Can I ask you a question?
it
Was
was
that their
horrible.
protect was that their projection or your response to an unknown being presented to you?
I believe that was their projection. I believe that they were filled with hate and rage, and
Mm-hmm.
they wanted to see me filled with terror because the second they saw me respond in fear, they all swarmed on me, and it was
Okay.
utterly
But the reason I
terrifying.
ask the question is that, I've had experiences like that myself, and I find that our general experience of the unknown is one of fight or flight.
Right. Fear
And
response is normal, even to good beings.
Mhm.
You'll see that in the Bible,
Well, the vibrations are so
Yeah,
high that it's like getting smacked with a freight train, right? And
right.
either you
Like,
have to rise to the occasion or you fall into fear. And when you
yes,
rise to the occasion, there's this unconditional love sensation that's
yes.
beyond anything that you can imagine.
So I've encountered things on both spectrums,
Hmm.
that that thing was just clearly bad. Um, when I was 21, um, I had my vision where Jesus came to me in a dream, and then I had different things happen to me after that.
Tell
Um,
me what that was like, because I've had him appear to me, um, to the point
I
of appearing to me, and other people saw him too,
Wow, yeah, he was invisible in the dream.
except in your head.
Um, in the dream, I didn't know it was him.
Ah,
He
okay.
he came to me in a helicopter. So that was personal to me because in the army, there was a traumatic event that happened where I had to was in a convoy, and me and a group of people had to report to a helicopter crash and deal with the mess,
Oh,
which, when somebody jumps out of a helicopter, not the right thing to do. You're supposed to
yeah,
ride it down for obvious reasons.
yeah, yeah.
Deflates, do things. So, and I had many Black Hawk rides in the army. So for me, this was kind of like um his chosen medium that he came to visit. I
Sure,
was with
sounds
a
familiar.
friend. Yes, I was with a friend, and we were in this really, really bad neighborhood in the dream, and we were scared, and we ended up in this compound that was like run by the cartel. People standing around with guns and stuff, and it was really scary, and we just wanted to get out of this place. And it was symbolic of where I was in my life at that time. It was
Sure,
just
dreams always are.
addictions and just a mess.
Right.
This was my lowest point. And this helicopter came in and landed, and the door opened, and a voice said, "Get in." We didn't ask questions. We just wanted out of there. So we just jumped in, and this helicopter flies away, and he starts doing all of these manic maneuvers. Um, there's a mountain, and we're going straight toward the mountain. Then it dive bombs and shoots into a tunnel. Of course, you don't want to fly in a tunnel with a helicopter, and me and my friend were screaming. When he comes out of the tunnel, there's some power lines right there, and that was the personal connection with me because that's what downed the helicopter. There was
Hmm.
a news reporter guy on a skiff with his camera, and he kept telling the chopper pilot to go down lower, and he ended up getting hit. He hit some lines and brought the helicopter down. Well, this helicopter pilot in my dream went under the power lines. And instead of just going under and being free of them, he did a flip around them. And then he went up into the sky. And me and my friend are just screaming and screaming and
Oh, no
screaming.
doubt.
And finally it settles down, this really manic, insane takeoff and introduction. And the sun just comes up, right? All of this happened pre-dawn, and now the sun's coming up, and we could see we're over this vast plain of wheat, and this golden amber light is shining into the cab, and this feeling
Sounds
of
really
peace,
soothing.
peace and euphoria starts filling me and my friend, and we're like, wow, man, this is more like it, you know? And I'm like,
There is light at the end of the tunnel,
and
right?
I'm thinking, who is this crazy pilot, right? And I lean forward, and the seat is indented, and the controls are moving, but the pilot's invisible. And I'm just so puzzled. And I sit back and I say to my friend, the pilot's invisible. I can't see him. And my friend is, we're just puzzled, right? And the helicopter comes back down and it lands, and we're in the same place. The door opens, it says, get out. So me and my friend jump out, and then the voice says to my friend, you get back in. So my friend got back in, door shuts, he flies away. I look around and there's all these dead bodies and expended cartridges on the ground. It was a huge firefight, apparently. We were taken out of there right before something huge went down.
Hmm.
And I was like, still scared because it's the same place. I'm like, where can I get out of here? And the gate was open. This is big gate where you could drive through in it. I just trepidatiously walked toward the gate and walked through it and walked out and down the street. And I was free of this place. And the further I got away, the lighter I felt. And then I woke up. And at first, I didn't remember all the elements of the dream. I just felt really good, and I was like, "Oh, wow, something significant happened. What was that?" And so I started recalling the dream. And when I got to the part about the pilot, I was like, "Oh yeah, that was really weird. The pilot was invisible. Who was that pilot?" And I'm just talking to myself, sitting there in the
Yeah.
bed.
Speaking of the invisible hand, right?
I heard the name Jesus spoke audibly in my ear, and he was so real and so profound. This chills shot through my body from head to toe, and all this love just immediately followed.
Exactly.
And
That was my
his
point earlier,
name,
right?
yes, something about his name carried that power that, I mean, I've heard Jesus' name many times in my life up to then. My grandmother, my great grandmother was very Pentecostal, and I stayed at her house. Me and my brother stayed at her house when we were little kids, and so we had these seeds of faith planted at a young age. But hearing the name Jesus from this context or from a podium or whatever, was
Just like an
different.
automatic release of all the fear and angst and suffering that you had in the moment, right?
When he says his name, you know that it's him. There's no denying it. He cuts through all of the communication barrier. He has backdoor access to our consciousness, to our spirit. So it's just like he says his name, and with that came all this love. And I fell out of the bed and I started crying. I'm like, wow, what's happening to me? So I became a born again believer there on that day when I was 21. I would have said I was Christian before,
Mm.
but when I read the Bible and the way I lived my life, it was not. It was, I made my
Well,
own
you got to
rules.
consider
So
that. Let's take a moment and just reflect on how the Bible got put together. Originally, that was under the Emperor Constantine, right? So he bridged church and state with the threat of if you don't believe, you will die. And,
yeah,
how do you rationalize creating something that initially completely dismisses women and makes them um, less than, right? With the Adam's rib, right? So here's a story that immediately puts women down.
it
And that's
can
a
be taken
that
that way. It has been
that's a
incorrectly
patriarchal.
taken.
Well, I
Yeah,
understand, but looking at the entire picture and the pieces through it, it's not just taking one thing and putting it, taking it out of context. This was a way that the patriarchy of the time put things together to manipulate populations and control them. And this is what Howard Bloom gets into in his book, The Lucifer Principle. It has nothing to do with Lucifer, right? But it has to do with
Hmm.
small groups of people manipulating masses by telling lies over and over again till they become truth in the believer's eyes or ears or heart,
Yeah.
whatever that may be, right? So here's something that was never questioned. And when it was, that was threat of death,
Yeah.
right? So if you've got that energy embedded in a population over thousands of years, what do you think's going to happen? And we know about cellular memory, Bruce Lipton stuff and all of those microbiologists and folks that are saying, that these cellular memories are present. Rupert Sheldrake and his memes and creodes, right? Cultural memories and all of these historical things that are still embedded in our genetic codes because we haven't questioned them yet. And now
Hmm.
in this day and age, we're beginning to question all of it because we can.
Hmm.
We're no longer under a threat, so to speak. Yeah, people can be dismissive and discounting and all that kind of stuff, but we're not under threat of death if we don't believe. Then we have experiences like you and I with a direct connection with Jesus or some other beings, which others do have as well. It totally, to me, and I could be wrong, I'm not saying I'm infallible, but it seems like there's a whole new experience that we're evolving into. Now, your explorations into UFOs in the Bible, once you had that experience, what led you to this inclusion of UFOs and extraterrestrials?
Okay, so I intuitively already knew, you could say, elements of well, a greater reality, since a young age. I
Hmm.
had seen those things. Then during the army, I encountered this glowing ball of energy in the jungle. And on that particular occasion, I was with my team leader. I had zero fear whatsoever. And, my logic was still fully intact. And I'm
Right.
like talking to my team leader saying, if this thing wanted to kill us, it would have.
Yeah,
Look
you'd
at
be
these
dead
things.
already.
It's the size of a soccer ball and it's pure
Yeah.
energy. And it looked like pure electricity. And um, I have my M60 gunner. Yeah, I was the M60 gunner back then, and I have my M60 on, and I'm like, well, I want to go talk to this thing because it came right to our position. It was only like 30 feet away
Right.
from the depths of the Panamanian jungle, and I'm like, um, this is acting. It's sentient. It's not acting like ball lightning. It's not acting like swamp gas. This thing was out there and it made a beeline straight here, and now it's stopped. It's curious. And I want to talk to it. This is my
Well,
Captain Kirk
sure.
moment. This is
Return the
first
curiosity,
contact.
right?
Oh, my team leader was yelling at me and stuff. I disobeyed a direct order. Sorry. I'm not going to
Shame
pass
on
up first
you.
contact. I'm like, dude, we want to be peaceful with this thing because, first of all, it could have probably killed us both right now instantly if it
Right.
wanted to. Secondly, we're in his backyard, you know, or this thing, whatever it is. And I feel like it's alive. And so I took off my M60. I disarmed myself and gave my spiel to this thing that, we come in peace and, it doesn't look like it, but we do. Our beefs with Noriega, it totally, on the human level. And we're out here in the jungle because we're afraid troops are coming in. I'm talking to this ball of light, right?
Right.
It didn't it didn't speak to me with language like English, but it did emit to me its presence to such a degree. So it was flashing on and off, right? Um, and it would flash on about every 30 seconds and then move somewhere else and then flash on again, right? By the time it got to where we were, I was strongly feeling its presence, almost like it planted its GPS in my head. It's like that feeling of being watched times 1,000, right?
Right.
And I could literally feel it
Well,
moving.
anything's available to those who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, right?
uh, it was letting me know where it was at, even though I couldn't see it. It was invisible. And we had night vision goggles, right? AM PVS 7s, and we're looking through. I'm looking, and I'm like, I can't see it, I can't hear it, but I know it's there and I feel it. it flew right over my head and behind me, and I turned around and I told the team leader, I said, the next time it flashes, it's going to flash right there. And when I said the word there and pointed, it flashed exactly where I was pointing to confirm to me,
Interesting example of the interconnectedness that
yes,
we often
it
don't
was.
realize we have.
And so this thing, I never felt like, uh, to me, it felt like some sort of a curious animal, if anything. And
Hmm.
it was investigating us. It was curious, like, what are you doing out here in this
Sure.
inhospitable place for humans? About the most inhospitable place on the planet. Um, but this thing was curious, and so was I, for that matter. And I just, when it flashed on cue, I just got so excited. And I'm like, "Did you see that? Did you see that? It
Right.
communicated with me. This is
And your
so
energy
incredible."
level is astronomical at that point, right?
Yeah. So that experience kind of like was one of the more positive ones where I got to communicate with something
Hmm.
good. And I'm like, yeah, I know there's good stuff out there too.
Well, what it sounds
Uh,
like from your description is what many call orbs, right? That are
yes.
spheres of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife, she originally hails from Leningrad, USSR. And as a kid, she grew up as a privileged environment and became a piano pedagogue over the years. Russian educational systems far superior to
Mm-hmm.
any that I'm aware of. At any rate, about 8 years old, she's in her room one night. There's a storm, and this ball, like you're describing, same size, came right up to her window. And she said it was weird. It was like we were having this communication exchange, and there was this unconditional loving energy that she was getting from it, this interconnectedness, right? No fear,
Mm-hmm.
no nothing, just this near bliss, and yet an understanding that there was a consciousness there that was exchanging energy with her.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's thousands of stories about these orbs and the ability to have a consciousness in that form that doesn't need a physical form, that can just move around in ways that we don't understand yet. And yet we still have this at least awareness that there are possibilities, people who can bilocate, people who can teleport, people who can experience telepathy and all of these kinds of things. However, in order to be able to do that, you've got to be somewhat fearless because it is the unknown and
Yeah.
there are these philosophical structures, if you will, in place for us to be afraid of the unknown
Yeah.
instead
Well,
of
I mean, the fear
embrace it
response,
with curiosity like you did.
yeah, the fear response is there as a survival mechanism, but if you don't let it overtake you and you observe long enough
And that's a
to be
conscious
able to,
choice you can make.
yeah, to be able to inch forward a little bit. Like
Yeah.
Moses when he saw the burning bush, he didn't just turn run screaming, right?
He
He
got curious.
he got curious and he went forward, but didn't necessarily run and jump into the bush, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like more let's check this out.
Yeah. Well, the fiery furnace was
And
mentioned later, right?
right, right. And that's a point that I make that a lot of people tend to you know run with the first experience, the first emotion, and not to say that you completely abandon common sense because
Oh,
I
actually, I think you epitomize it because the core essence of us is to love and be loved. And
right,
everything else is shadows above that. And it really
right,
takes a concerted effort, time, discipline, choices made to be
yes.
in that place.
And to a certain extent, I think that, well, where's your faith then? If you don't trust God enough to protect you, to be able to at least go forward and ask a few questions, then, what good is it? You
Right.
know,
Well, in
you know,
NDEers, one of the common things that they express is once they've had that experience of either near death or clinical death, where they go into the light or beyond or whatever, they come back with a recognition that there is no death. There may be a loss of physical form. However, the consciousness doesn't disappear.
Yeah, there's a transition. And then some people just experience that sleep state. They don't get to the other side of that, to
Hmm.
experience consciousness while their body's dead. But there's lots of variation in there. But for me, it became an investigation early on, when I heard Jesus's voice, and I'm like, okay, that part of reality, that's real.
Right.
But this other part of reality, I mean, up until that point, I was immersed in all this new
Well,
agey
there's a
type
huge
stuff.
delta there, right? And so
Yeah,
how do you cross that?
yeah.
How do you rationalize? How do you allow that to unveil itself to you?
And on the one side, I'm like, I get this that, Christians see how the existence of ETs on other planets lends itself to evolution and all this stuff that they're talking about. And then you get into the horrors of evolution, that what it's taken people to, like Hitler with his master race and all of this stuff,
Right. Well, like Eckhart
justifying.
Tolle says, you got to have the pain and suffering in order to grow. Well, if you're stagnant and you're not moving, then something chaotic, horrific in people's minds needs to happen in order for everybody to wake up and smell the roses, right?
Hmm. So, there were things about the ET UFO stuff that has a darkness to it, but then there's also this other part where, Bible talks about angels good and bad. So there's good guys and there's bad guys. Star Wars, for
Well, we
example,
see
I
it
think
that
is
way, right? But here's what I've found, and I'll offer this just for maybe a bit of contemplation. In the Kabbalah, there's 72 names of God, 36 greater and 36 lesser. We see them as angels and demons. Yet both of them are guiding us to the one within us. One gives you the memo, the other tests to make sure you got it.
so in my book, The Strong Delusion, I talk about how Satan is a tool.
Do you
That
know where the name originally comes from?
you know what Satan?
Yeah.
It means accuser.
It means adversary, but do you know where the word actually came from? I found this in my research early on. It comes from the
Okay,
Greek thetan, Thetan. It means thinker.
okay.
It was a word that was used like apocalypse, right? It was
Uh,
taken out of context and made into a fictitious enemy because there is everything is within us. Nothing is
well,
separate from us.
I would say that we have the Holy Spirit connecting to us,
Oh, absolutely.
and
That's
where
what
we
connects
are,
everything, but our choices make the difference.
right, where we are in our relationship with God is whether or not we're abiding with that
I
voice.
would say it's more of a relationship with self. God is within. It's not an exterior being.
Well, I do believe that there's Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, as the Bible discusses,
Why
and
would
that's the
Jesus say the
identity.
kingdom is within?
Because where does he say that, first of all?
I can't quote you chapter and verse,
Okay.
but he does.
Well, the Holy Spirit is within us, right? And he does send the Holy Spirit, but you can reject the Holy Spirit.
Again,
That
there's the choice I'm talking about,
and then that doesn't
right?
mean that the Holy Spirit's still not able to communicate with you, or that God,
Absolutely.
but God respects our free will. And I would also make a distinction that there's only one creator. God is the creator. Jesus is through
And we don't
Jesus all
understand that level of creation yet. We're only projecting our human concepts on it.
right. Well, I would say that Jesus is creator and I'm not. So I
Well, wait,
have
wait, wait,
Jesus
wait,
in
wait, wait,
me.
wait. Let me
I have,
go. Let me back up just a little bit.
I can
Did he
create
not say that
things.
anything is possible to those who believe and that we can do all that he can do and more?
He was talking about his miracles manifest, and he was talking about faith in general and telling people to stop limiting themselves.
And what does
Uh,
that mean? If he says everything I can do, ye can do and more.
and we were made in his image, but he made us. We didn't make him.
Well, it said we were created in their image. First part of the
Right.
Bible, God is
Elo
plural.
Elohim is a plural word. Uh, I believe that refers to Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
Well, I have a
And
different
it's,
perspective from, if I may share, and I know
yeah.
this is going to blow your mind because it did mine initially, right? So I was given the opportunity to travel to the origins of the Trinity. For decades, I had a question of, okay, where does this originally come from? Why do we have this? Because it's ubiquitous in all the religions. And one time I was going through a process called multi-level awareness. It was a technique that William Swigart developed in the 1950s. And there's a facilitator that assists the participant through prompts to experience things and then report back. And
Hmm.
I was getting ready for one of those, and my guide, who I'd met just after my spiritual awakening in college at 18, came and waved to me. He said, "Come." And so I'm out of body. We're traveling across the starscape initially, and then it got black or indigo. And then we ended up at this three sun solar system that had about a dozen small green, similar sized planets, and the spheres themselves were like 100 times bigger. And as we arrived, I felt like Ellie coming out of the wormhole in Contact, right? The experience was so awe-striking that had I been in the physical form, I know I would have had tears coming down my face, right? Because it
Hmm.
was just so magnificent. Well, as I was watching this from a distance, there was three voices that I could understand the distinction between them, but they all said the same thing. We are not only your forefathers, we are also the forefathers of your solar system. And so I started to ask questions. My guide Zephyr says, "Nope, that's it. That's all you need. You'll figure it out." So back we came. Now, on the way back, I already knew, if that's the macro, the micro is probably proton, electron, and neutron. Something doesn't fit there because hydrogen only has two, so there's got to be a tertiary element there that we're missing, probably the invisible, which could mean that hydrogen is the conduit for consciousness. And I've had some quantum biologists that have reached that conclusion as well. Well, what was interesting though is the facilitator timed the journey there and timed it back, and it was the same. It was 8 minutes. Now,
Hmm.
the only reference I've been able to find to the speed of thought, which is probably how fast we were traveling, was in the Urantia book, and they quoted as 841 trillion miles per second. We can't even
Okay.
fathom that, right?
Uh-huh.
This is just an experience I had. Believe it or not, it was my direct experience. I don't claim it to be true for everybody, but it was true for me, and it explained a lot of things in that short time. That was 1989.
Hmm.
So I would just like to offer that as something to, just kind of put it in your thinking cap and ponder it. I'm not trying to convince you of anything, just offering some additional information that you might consider. Now,
Hmm.
moving forward, in this relationship with the Bible and UFOs and extraterrestrials, where do you see that going in relationship to humanity?
Well, the Bible talks about everything, past, present, and future. I mean, people think
Hmm.
about the book of Revelation, for example, which is the New Testament version of the book of Daniel in the Old Testament. And it lays out history in this repetitious cycle, uh, ancient past, what's going on right now, and what's coming down the line. Um, there's elements, for example, like the mark of the beast, right? Revelation 13. That happened in the past in the province of Laodicea. In order to buy or sell in that province, you had to go to this temple at the entrance of the area where the merchants would go. You had to burn incense to Caesar.
Hmm.
This large structure had all of these, this pantheon of Greek gods and whatnot. And then there's this huge statue of Caesar up there, and you actually
Right.
literally had to bow and
So
pray to
what I hear
this.
you saying is we don't have to fear the mark of the beast because it already happened,
Well,
right? And there's
no,
all this
no.
projection now.
Uh,
What I wonder though
no, I'm
is,
not. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said that this happened back then. John
okay,
was referring to
so you're
this
saying we
back
could be a
then.
repeat.
But yes, prophetic
Okay.
things of major
Well,
significance
cycles, a
echo
repeat of, yeah,
they echo
absolutely.
throughout
Patterns,
history.
cycles.
Yes. So there's elements of that happened back then. People knew what he was talking about, but at the same time, he's like also talking about, he mentions things that haven't happened yet. Clearly, we have not made an image of the beast, which is a man-made thing that can talk and walk and think and put it in charge of the global economy. We have not done that back
Yet.
then. We've done it now. We're like right
Almost.
there now.
Yeah, we're really close.
And
We're really close. Now, what's surprising though is the number, right? The 666 is to be understood with knowledge and wisdom, and or to be interpreted with knowledge and wisdom. And it's the
well, it's
number
the
of
number of
man.
man. Yes.
Right. So what's that mean? The 666. Where's that fit in science? Because if you don't have the science, then you can't back it up. Well, in the science, the 666 is a carbon atom, six protons, six neutrons, and six electrons. That's our basic building block, right?
Okay.
That unifies everybody.
Yeah.
We just don't see it yet. We're still acting like we're all separate instead of unified. And
And
that's the next step of our evolution, I believe.
that may be a reference to our current state. But then the Bible talks about a translation that we'll go through. So we
Sure.
are
Well, we got to
uh
realize that the chaos or patterns we're projecting that don't fit, but we don't see the order in them yet because we're too afraid of each other to recognize the love that we have and hold and can exhibit.
yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. Um that I believe God designed us as what I would call an ecogenic species, that we are like the
Good
angels.
term. I love that.
Jesus said we will be like the angels.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so we
imagine
were
formless
designed.
consciousness that has said, okay, we're going to create like those three suns, right?
Uh-huh.
Here's a creation. How are we going to experience it? Wouldn't we want to? Well, how are we going to do that? How can we get all that varied experience throughout all the dimensions and levels of emotion, of sensation, of satiation of the senses, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
if we're formless?
Yeah.
So there's the story of Lucifer, right? He's the most high angel of light and music. Well, what do you get when you combine light and music? You condense it into form, right? That's the elements of it. We're now knowing that through quantum physics, right? There is
Mm-hmm.
no matter. It's all energy. It's just arranged vibrationally. Well, how can you think your way through a system built on vibration? You got to sense your way through it because thinking is in that quantum computer sitting on top of your shoulders. If you don't process information that is available through the body first, then you're just taking beliefs and shoving it into the body and wondering why you're diseased, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. And there's some ancient technology to that. The ancient Indians or indigenous, they call it the three brain system. Your gut is your first brain, your heart is your second brain, and that supercomputer, quantum computer on top of your shoulders is the third brain. Well, you got to feed it like AI, right? You got to feed it good information, clear information. Well, how are you going to get that? Your body is a transceiver made for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get that yet. We're in total denial of our bodies other than the satiations that we get.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense?
So somewhat, yeah. I mean, science just recently found neurons in the heart, and they do say that the heart does some kind of thinking, but we've known that all along, you
And
know.
there's more neurosensors in the gut than there is in the heart. Science has
Okay.
also proven that. So why
Okay.
is that?
Yeah. The thinking, we may think it's centralized in the head, but it is throughout the body.
That's the
Um,
sensations. How we interpret it is the function of the brain.
uh-huh. So anyway, yeah, a lot of what I get into in terms of connecting ET life and the greater reality and
Mhm.
stuff with the Bible is, kind of bringing it back full circle, that as I was researching a lot of this stuff, I was seeing connections with end times prophecy. Jesus said when he returns in the future, it will be like the days of Noah. So he mentioned that in Matthew and in Luke. And so I start looking at the days of Noah, and you don't get very far in the Bible. Very first book, Genesis chapter 6, you see about these beings, the B'nai Elohim, that came down, and you can read more about it in the book of Enoch. Uh, these beings came down, they interfaced with humanity, and it seemed like they were good guys at first because they were giving us all this knowledge and stuff, but then everything went really bad. And uh, they had these hybrids known as the Nephilim, inherently evil. When they died, they became what we now call demonic
Well,
things,
what do humans
you know.
do in the process, right? When we're given stuff, the ego takes over, wants to control, doesn't care how it behaves as long as it gets what it wants.
Yes, and pride is the original sin. Um, and they tap into that. Um, and they have the same message. Well, Jesus said that they're coming back in the future. So I thought, okay, that's something that we need to be aware of and we should be prepared for. But we should also be aware of the fact that, the Bible talks about angels with their angelic chariots, good guys and bad guys. Probably applies to both of them. We need to understand what angels are. They can be physical beings, and they're probably our entire universe is multidimensional.
Well, let me ask you this question.
And
I understand what you're saying, and that's a human perspective. Are we one?
there is a connectedness between us and God, uh, but we don't want to align ourselves with
Simple
beings who
question though,
are.
are we one? If we consider that the universe is one creation, why don't we perceive it as one?
We
We,
come
as
from a single.
humans, tend to create the bipolar relationships because we don't understand that we live in paradox and that there are these two choices we can make. The discipline is being able to recognize that those two choices exist and following the frequency instead, that unifying love that's within each one of us.
I would say that yes, we are one in the sense of, for those of us who want to continue to exist, those of us who want to align with God's
Well,
will
either it is or isn't, right?
and the
You can't have
creation
we
for
are
which
one except. That's just not logical.
I
Hmm?
I'm not going to say that I'm one with the devil.
I, no, that's not what I'm asking. Creation is one energy that has a diversification. It's still one. And when we can recognize that and operate as one, things are in harmony.
Yeah, in the beginning, God, outside of time space, chose to create everything.
Hmm.
And from his perspective, it all existed all at once,
Now, maybe
all of
quantum
time.
sciences is showing us that, yes, that does exist and we can experience that,
And
right?
all of
Even
time,
AI has
you
an
know.
emotional intelligence in it that is just spectacular. initially people didn't recognize it, but it's built in, and AI really isn't artificial, right? It's an aggregated collection of human data, human produced data.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I see some things coming in our future. Um, I do see open contact possibly right around the corner. Of course, I've been thinking that would happen sooner than it has. So
Yeah, well, the
they've been,
military just released their Tic Tac videos,
yes,
less than 10
they've
years
been
ago,
dragging their
and they take
feet.
a long time.
Yes, but we've been seeing a soft disclosure, and then of course all these other ways of revealing things that, for example, what they found under the pyramids. I just had a dream about that yesterday night, that I kept seeing the pyramid and the base and these
Right.
columns going down with these obvious, copper coils going around these columns, and they're so big. I forget how far those go down into the earth, like a
Sure.
half mile or something. And it's like, how could people from 4,000 years ago have built this? They had to
Well, they
find that.
didn't. And here's a story I'll share. And I heard this long ago. It's the story of a planet called Maldek. And this is an indigenous legend, myth, however you want to look at it. Long time ago, there was, and I'll explain it in modern terms using the Kardashev scale, right? And the Kardashev scale is type 1, type 2, and type 3 civilizations. Type 1 uses planet energy and a consciousness to go along with that. Type 2 uses the solar system energy and a consciousness to go along with that. And a type 3 uses galactic energy and a consciousness to go along with that. Now, this civilization on Maldek had developed to nearly a type 2. And in order to, they were running out of energy, was what was happening. And so they came to Earth, built the pyramids, and we're going to use them to, and this is where those copper spirals come in, to transfer the electromagnetic energy generated from Earth to their planet.
Hmm.
And their calculations were off. There was a type 3 civilization that was observing all of this, and they knew because they'd been there before. And so they waited. They tried to inform, just like the ETs are doing with us now, to kind of, slow down, guys. You're headed towards destruction. And they didn't listen. Pride, right? No, we got our math, right? Well, the math was wrong. And
Mm.
so when they fired the machinery up, it destroyed the planet instead. Now, there was also an escape pod that was built. And that escape pod, this type 3 civilization transported those who were of pure heart and mind to it so that they could survive. Now, story goes that that escape pod came here, and it's our moon. We've proven it's hollow. I had a conversation with Dr. Edgar Mitchell, and he said to me during that, I want to tell you something, but you can't tell anybody till after I'm dead. This was 1997. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, okay. He said, as soon as now he was the pilot for the lunar excursion module. And
Mm-hmm.
so he said, as soon as they left the command module, this was Apollo 14, I believe, there was a metallic silver cylinder spiraling around them. He said, I couldn't tell the size because there was no perspective from which to judge it. Couldn't tell if it was piloted on board or from the surface. However, I could tell it was definitely nothing from Earth. Now, about 10 years or so later, I heard of a story of Buzz and Neil who saw the same cylinders standing on a rectangular platform just beyond the dark side of the moon. Now, these are things that definitely they would have had gag orders on. If we'd know
Mm-hmm.
this stuff, it would blow people's minds and who knows what would happen. So, with that, if you look at the structure of our solar system, the asteroid belt is where a planet could have been,
I write about that. I called it a
right?
stera. Yeah.
So Yeah, it could be many names. Maldek is the one that I'm familiar with. But this story, all of these things have their basis in fact. And this was millions of years ago, by the way.
Okay, so this planet blew up.
Yep. Because
Okay.
there were, I'll just say, idiots at the helm that didn't question their own calculations enough to make sure things would work. And when they fired it up, they may have been just testing it. I don't know. Because it's hard, especially that long ago, we don't know. And there's not ageless, possibly ageless. There's civilizations, they're millions of years ahead of us, right?
Hmm.
So that is a possibility that we cannot discount if we're looking at the big picture, right? Over time. Humans
Yeah.
tend to look at things in snapshots and think that that's everything.
Yeah.
It's
And
just
and what
intriguing,
I've
you know?
what I've uncovered is that the Bible actually says that Lucifer was a king at one point in the Garden of Eden. So this had to predate Adam and Eve.
I
This
don't
is
remember
in
that. I do remember him being called the Most High Angel of Light and
he
Music.
had a throne. So if
Well,
you
yeah,
have a
wouldn't you?
throne,
The Most High Angel of Light and Music? Yeah, it'd probably be a throne.
so a throne implies subjects that you're if you're
Does it?
on a throne, yeah, that you're a king in the biblical sense, it does.
Well, and a king is responsible for them, for caring for his subjects or her subjects.
Hmm. So you read this in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. And this is before it talks in those passages before he sinned, before he became filled with pride and rebelled against God. And then it discusses his how he ascended above the heights of the clouds, you know.
why don't we question that? Because in my experience, you have some that's called the Most High Angel of Light and Music. To reach that level, there's nothing that would change that, the integrity of that energy. Now,
Well,
we don't know
free
what
will,
commitment is. We say we commit to something, but if we have a hard time with it, our commitment disappears.
yeah. I would say that he was the first angel to rebel against
Condensed into
God,
form, led the rest of us.
to rebel against God. And it was in that rebellion that the earth was wiped out. And you read that in Genesis 1, chapter 1, verse 2. And the earth became void and without form. It's talking about a destruction that happened here long ago in the very beginning. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the
Could
heavens
that
and
have
the
been
earth.
Maldek instead?
And I believe that that might have been part of that destruction. I think that Lucifer's kingdom was across the entire solar system here,
You
that he
think.
had,
But what's your
he,
sense? What I
my
hear
sense
you
is that he
saying is
had,
this, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, right? I'm trying to make
yeah,
the
I believe
distinction
that there was
between
life
feeling
on
and
Mars.
thinking.
Yeah, I believe was life on Mars. I believe that there was a planet where the asteroid belt is, and that he had a base there, that he had life was all throughout this solar system, and that all of that got obliterated.
Is the universe life friendly or is it hell bent on destruction? I mean,
I would say,
consider from a
I'll,
creator's standpoint, why would you want to destroy part of your creation if it's all connected and it's one? See, we still, this is where I have a problem with things. We still think that there's separation when there isn't. We choose to see that separation rather than see a holistic system.
I do see a holistic system. I do see it all as coming from God originally in the beginning as a creation.
Hmm.
Um,
And it was all good, right? Everything was in harmony.
it was,
So, and it
but
was our
when
choice to throw it out of harmony. So we've made all these distinctions to keep things separate. And it's been helped by those who originally did the canonization of the Bible. Now, in the Nag Hammadi scrolls, I believe there's a place in there where Jesus is talking to Thomas, and he's doubting Thomas, right? And he says to Thomas, "Don't ye know that ye are God as I am God?" Now, you may not have read that. Um,
Now I have the Nag Hammadi,
okay.
but uh, I would not agree that I am God. Uh, I don't I don't want people to
If
worship
God
me.
is everything, why aren't you?
I am made in God's image, um,
Okay. All right. So
and
what happens
and
when you
I
grow up?
and I have the Holy Spirit in me, and I can operate as God's representative with the Holy Spirit in me and leading
Right.
me.
Well, this is what the Vedas say, the 15,000-year-old Sanskrit poems, right? The essence of the Vedanic philosophy is that we're all divine threads, incarnate, connected to source, capable of God consciousness. Now, what's that mean? We're capable of being in harmony.
Yeah. But and then there's also a message. It's in Revelation, and I consider this my mission, the mission of the first angel. And in the middle of all of this stuff going on in Revelation with the mark of the beast and all of this stuff, there's an angel that's flying in the heavens and saying to all the people of earth, saying, worship the creator. And he's reminding people, like, who God is. He's the creator. He's the one who originated everything in the beginning.
Right. Well, there's many
So
people today that are
yeah,
saying that. They're going beyond the religious and religions distinctions that they're separate and saying, look, there's an essence within each one of us that is pure. And it's not bifurcated by the separation of religion. It's, again, one.
but I wouldn't discount that there is a deception that has happened, that the reality that we're in at this current point in time
Oh, absolutely. I
is
totally agree
broken.
with you
It
because we're still at war with
something,
people.
and that is something that I innately feel in my gut, that there's something broken here with this reality, and it's something I've struggled with too. Like, why did God allow
Totally
it to
agree.
break?
And it
Uh,
really
I recently wrote an
hurts,
article
right?
on my blog, and it's called "Can God Learn?" um, because it goes against traditional theology that, no, God can't possibly learn. But I do believe that God does learn in a
Well, if we're made in his
special,
image, what do you think we're doing, right?
is a special kind of learning that does apply to God. And the only way that reality makes sense is if there is a kind of learning that applies to him. And
Well, there's a
God the
finer and
Father,
finer
I see God the Father outside of time space, and for him, all learning happened all at once.
right.
Like certain things didn't
So
exist.
where's
Sin
God the
didn't
Mother
exist.
too? If we know things and how creation takes place, where's the feminine?
I would say that Holy Spirit lends itself to a feminine quality. Sophia is the divine name
Hmm.
for it in Hebrew.
Pistis
Uh,
Sophia is a
and
great work.
so you could say that if there's a feminine aspect to God, it would be encapsulated in the Holy Spirit.
Hmm.
Um, but I see kind of God the Father outside of all time space, coordinating everything. Jesus is like the interface, the physical manifestation within time space, going through time
Right.
space and experiencing time space. So,
Oh, that's
and then
perfect.
Holy Spirit is connecting with everyone, feeding all of that information to the head, who is Jesus, the head of the body.
Right.
So we're connected to Jesus through Holy Spirit, almost like a single body, right?
Sure. Oh,
And
absolutely. And I love that,
yeah,
if I may share, and I know, this is we're having a really wonderful conversation, and I truly appreciate your openness to have it. When I went through my spiritual awakening, I knelt and I prayed, Father, I want to know what truth is, and I'm willing to die for it if necessary. And I meant it. The following week, I got called up. I was in meditating. I was in pre-med program at the time. And during meditation, this voice I've been familiar with since a child. I was orphaned and adopted, by the way. And so I had this inner voice happen in about 5 is when I first heard it and started working with it. So this voice asked me if I'm willing to die for what I believe in. And my first thought was Christ consciousness. The feeling was not quite full. I didn't question it. I moved on. The next thought was cosmic consciousness, which is what basically Jesus had, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it felt full. That's the formless. So I said yes. And then I get a tug from my solar plexus, and there's a guitar riff on an album that I was listening to, perfectly timed. And I pop out of body, turn to look at my body laying across my dorm room bed, turn back to look where I'm going. And before I can get turned around, I'm engulfed by white light. And it has this amazing sensation to it. And then I, without realizing I was thinking, it felt effervescent, iridescent, and high pitched. Then I realized I was thinking. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm thinking I can't be dead. Woohoo! Is there more? And then I
Mm-hmm.
went into a sphere from the white light. I went into what appeared to be a sphere of indigo light or indigo with points of light surrounding me. And I knew the points of light were points of consciousness, whether in body or not. I wasn't sure because I wasn't in body myself and I knew it. But I had a
Mm-hmm.
sense that they were somehow. And so the voice picks back up at that point and says, these are those that you are to work with in order to facilitate a new world order. It will happen in your lifetime. Know this to be true. Your path will be full of trials and tribulations. Have faith and trust that everything you need will be there at its appointed time. Trust and allow. And then I feel another rush of energy and I'm back in my body taking a gulp of air, instantly aware that we are all cosmic consciousness condensed into form, just unaware. Now, Jesus happened to be aware,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's why he said, here's the path, right? Here's what you can do and more because we're individuated with specific codes for performance, a perfected form, fit, and function, if you will, in the world, in that oneness.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the New World Order that was given to me, the understanding of it was harmony among people and planet, not the prescriptive one that's being thrust upon us for this world dominance of well,
Pushed by a group of billionaires
yeah, yeah, exactly. Right.
from
Now
Davos
that
Island. Yeah.
too is purposeful, right?
Yeah.
Because the systems have to be set up and they're doing it. Now, what will happen, in my opinion, with the help of, or maybe not, maybe it'll just be the choice of humans to say, hey, wait a minute. We have all the resources we need to feed, clothe, house, and care for everyone. It's just the distribution systems that are screwed up and under the control of others who like to keep the suppression going on because it feeds them. That's the
Yeah. And then
shift
every
from profit over
broken
people and
government in
planet.
the world is a different version of people trying to redistribute everybody's wealth, and it just doesn't
I don't
really
know
work
about
very
that.
well.
I think
Well, I mean,
that, they're
communism is
trying to, keep the resources for themselves and these billionaires, right?
right.
Instead of looking at, okay, who and what is who's necessary, who's in place, what's necessary in order for this evolutionary leap to take place, and then how can we, as individual human beings, grow into that?
Hmm. Yeah, and
Great question. Don't know that I got
yeah,
an answer.
we're not
I've got a
gonna.
possible solution with
Yeah,
planetarycitizens.net.
yeah. I don't think we're gonna get there without Jesus returning. And I
How's he
think
going to
that
return? Is it going to be inside or outside? Right? Because we're bereft, like we
it'll
started this
be from east to
conversation.
west. It'll be from east to west, and I also believe that uh, we got some things headed to us in our future that are going to be pretty tough to get through.
Well, the Eastern
Uh,
philosophy is much more centered inwardly than Western philosophy. I mean, look at Western medicine, right? We're trying to treat people, right? Keep them in this drug-induced or pharmacological realm that's profitable, right?
yes,
Eastern medicine, not.
Yeah, yeah. I not really particularly pleased with the way medicine's gone over here in the
Right. But
so-called
that's just
first
an
world
example of
country.
what you just said, of east to west, right? There's probably
Yeah,
multiple levels of what we could look for and potentially see that is underneath this process that we're going through.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, big changes are coming. And
But from a
you
militaristic
know,
standpoint,
yeah.
right, what do you think about the guys like Alonso and his crew and those that are talking about it? Again, they're talking about the potential, they're looking at it from a militaristic potential threat standpoint, which we tend to, as people, if we feel an unknown is a threat, instead of trying to understand it, we'll try to destroy it first, destroy or control or uh, reverse engineer and all of those kinds of things for our own use as
Yeah,
opposed to the benefit of others.
yeah. I have this sense that Alonso himself is a pawn, and he's kind of like being told what he's allowed to say and guided along the way.
Right. Right. How
And
about
that
Steve
they're
Bassett?
um
Steve's an
yeah,
old
Steve
friend. I've
Bassett.
known him for 30
Yeah,
some odd years.
yeah. And I've been in contact with him. He gave me my contact list to, reach out to different podcasts and stuff
Well,
and find
I
out.
think you
So
got me from him.
I probably did.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I believe that um we will have disclosure, that we will connect with other worlds, and there will be beings coming here probably pretty soon here.
My direct experience is
Um,
they already are.
they
And
are, but
there's
just not in the
thousands
public
of
eye.
me.
Just not in the public eye. In terms of,
Well, what do you wait,
like the
wait, 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 wait.
show.
Let's
You
back
mean
up a little bit,
like the
right?
show V,
We've got the
right?
military that released videos. We've got experiencers that's
Soft
got all kinds
disclosure.
of books and stories and the UFO
Yeah.
Congress and Contact in the Desert and there's stuff going on in Europe as well. So
I'm talking a level of open contact where beings are just able to fly down here into our, right out in the open, and
yeah.
and have international meetings with,
What do you think would
different
happen
people.
now if that were to take place? Could we handle it?
I think they're getting us to the point where we can.
So your
Uh,
answer is no, we couldn't in our current state.
some people would freak out, but in general, I think that they've done enough to condition us
Well,
that,
Arrival was a great movie to illustrate that point, right?
yeah, I think enough conditioning has happened to where it could probably happen. And I do believe that things are happening behind the scenes, probably from the ETs themselves.
I think it gives
But
humans too much credit. I've done that for decades and found out that I was not correct, right?
I
You
think the
think
only
and
reason it
believe that
hasn't,
people will handle more than they can, more than they do,
I
but when
think
you
the
put
only
them to
reason
the
it,
test, they don't.
uh, COVID taught me anything. If it taught me anything, it's that they don't really care about public safety, or whether people lose their mind or not. Okay,
Right.
so
Well, that
they
was the
go in
big
mass.
experience. That was the bell ringing that gave us the opportunity, and they even gave us the opportunity by demanding obsession on self-hygiene and sequestration. Well, what happens when you do that? You turn inward. You start thinking about yourself, your place, your beliefs, your life, your work, your play, what you're willing to do in order to have that harmony in your life. And many people started, gathering afterwards and these online discussion groups and things like that. There are hundreds of them that are looking for solutions to take us to the next level. Then there are those that didn't and are still in the fear-based control of what we were talking about earlier, the
Yeah,
oligarchs, if you will.
but yeah, I think that we're going to get past all of that. And the Bible talks about certain things in there, like, for example, there's this dynamic. So okay, if there's bad guys out there, why haven't they wiped us out? You know, they're obviously clearly more powerful than we are. Well, there's good guys out there that are holding them back, right?
I
The
see
Bible
it
talks
again. I
about
think
a
that's the bipolar. I've had a direct experience with draconians who are supposed to be the nastiest boogers, right? And they're not. The
I
energy
wouldn't
level
think
is so high that
of them in terms of black and white like that. I think that any species is going to be like that. That there's going to be good and bad within any species.
in order to do what they do, consider, okay, back to the type 1, 2, and 3 civilizations and whatever else is beyond that, right?
Uh,
In order to be able to travel, you have to have a high vibratory rate. And that constitutes zero malevolence in order to do that. Think about it vibrationally, right? We're always talking about the high vibes. The higher your vibration is, look at the Dawkins scale or the Hawkins scale, right?
mm,
0 to 1,000, right? Where's Christ at? He's like 997 or 1,000, right? Um, so in that place, to be able to have that kind of technology, that kind of mobility interdimensionally, there's no separation. There's only unity in order to be able to do that because you're understanding all the nuances of the grids, right? The energy of the universe, being able to move in ways sometimes near instantaneously, like the speed of thought, right?
mm.
There's no malevolence there. Would you agree that it's at that level, vibratory level, it's only pure love as we can conceive it?
Well, there is the fact that when Lucifer sinned, when he rebelled against God, that he
Not my
was taken
question. Not
out
my
of the
question.
midst of the
I'm
stones of
asking
fire.
you, would that constitute that high vibrational level that there is no malevolence?
In terms of travel from one place to another,
Vibrational level.
I don't think I would concede to say that they're all life in the cosmos is pure good.
And that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying to reach that level of technology and maneuverability, there has to be the consciousness that goes along with it, high vibratory rate that's incapable of malevolence.
The highest, most powerful beings are good. I would agree to that. And but there are those that have gone bad that are still
Where's
extremely
the proof
powerful.
in that other than the stories?
Yeah. Well, I take that from the Bible. Um,
And we're supposed to
yeah.
test the truth, right? We're
Yeah.
commanded to test the
Yeah.
truth.
Hmm. And I believe that there is a war, that we're in the middle of a war right now.
Oh,
It's
it's inside
and
each
it,
one of us and our
a war
choices.
from ancient times, and it's within each of us. That's where the main war is for
Well,
each of us.
in quantum physics and all of the studies of consciousness, everything's inside of us. Our outer world is a manifestation of what's inside of us. And if we're not clear inside of us, the outside is going to be really dirty.
Yeah. Hmm.
Now, that's that God consciousness capacity that we have. If we're made in the image, that means we're co-creators. So what are we creating? Well, let's look at the exterior world. This is what we've created. Do we want to change it? We have that capacity.
Yes. But the cool thing about the Bible that's interesting about it is it's got something called predictive prophecy, and it's extremely accurate. And it tells us, it has told us things that happened in the past before they happen. I mean, parts of the Bible, all throughout the Old Testament, for example, they're predicting Jesus. And almost on every page, it's like somebody's coming in the future.
Sure.
And then this happens. Over 300 prophecies were fulfilled to the letter when Jesus came. And it predicts things that are going to happen in our future as well.
Sure.
So these things have to do with things inside, but they're also happen to do with things that are going to happen on a global scale. And then it predicts into the eternal future, even beyond that, when New Jerusalem is brought back to Earth and transplanted from the planet where it's currently at to this planet. So it's a real physical city, maybe in a higher dimension, operating at a higher frequency, but it's this beautiful, it's the capital of all creation,
Hmm.
and it's on some planet in the northern hemisphere. God's going to transport it to Earth in the future. And you're going to have this society where part of us are still going to be reproducing like Adam and Eve, but they'll be sinless and perfect. And another part of us will be translated into an angelic status, and we'll all be with God, and that'll be God's future state for all of creation.
Super.
And everything that we're experiencing right now with sin and death and all of our confusion and struggle and all of the rebellion that happened from ancient times, it's a blip on the scale of eternity.
Absolutely.
From God's
Now,
perspective, it's just a blip, and
we're
it will be
running out of
cleaned up.
time, and I have commitments. So, what could you offer our audience for their own journey as advice?
As advice, I would say um, this is open to anyone because Jesus is real. He's not just an abstract thought or just one among any, you know, religious faiths or whatever, but Jesus is a real being and he is the king of all creation.
Hmm.
If you want to know for sure if he is and who he is, simply initiate a conversation with him and take some time to just quiet your mind and speak to God and ask him to illuminate you. And if you do it consistently and persistently enough, he will reply.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
John, this has
And
been a
yeah,
great conversation. I wish we had more time, and maybe we can do that. Thank you so much for your insight, wisdom, and sharing, and wonderful conversation.
thank you. And if anybody is curious about my books, you don't have
I'll
enough
have them
money
in
to
the links
pay.
below in the
Yeah.
description.
I
Um,
email free copies all the time for people that just want to sample it or just want to see without having to pay, no
sure.
problem. Uh,
Awesome.
so yeah.
Awesome. Again, thanks so much.
All right.
And
Thank you.
namaste. And in La Catch, thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. And for John and myself, we really appreciate your comments, your subscription, your sharing, your likes, and we both hope that you have an absolutely fantastic experience in this life and beyond. Thanks for sticking with us. We'll see you next time. You know, we've all got an aspect of the imposter syndrome within us. Would you like to find out what that is in you and transform it into something much better that actually serves you, reflects who you really are authentically, with credibility, integrity, honesty, service, and support? Wouldn't that be great? Imagine what that might be like. Well, I can help you do that. And it's not a pompous promise. It's a reality that I've been able to example in my own life. And if I've been able to do it, then others can too. And I can show you how. Just click the button below, set up an appointment, and we'll get started. I guarantee you, you will enjoy the conversation. And regardless of whether you hire me or not, you'll have some benefits from it that you can take and apply into your life. So thanks again and be well. Have a great day.